Things of Plants. Kimmerer is a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation and the SUNY Distinguished Teaching Professor of Environmental Biology. At the intersection of those two aspects of her life, she reveals the wisdom of sustainability as something both modern and ancient. As the season turns once more to the time of harvest and our country's holiday of Thanksgiving, I invite you into the wisdom and wondering that Kimmerer's book offers. She writes about our need to see ourselves as part of the ecosystem, that we should not merely take, but to instead both give and take. As heterotrophs, we do not photosynthesize our own energy. Our role is to consume, to exchange a life for a life. Kimmerer asks, how in our modern world can we find our way to understand the earth as a gift again, to make our relations with the world sacred again? I know we cannot all become hunter-gatherers, she writes. The living world could not bear our weight, but even in a market economy, can we behave as if the living world were a gift? Do you have a story of how you have grown or foraged or hunted your own food? Are you part of your ecosystem and of the give and take that is needed as you consume? As you sit down for a Thanksgiving meal, can you note where the various foods came from and how they came to your table?
For much of my life, I have had access to fresh-grown foods. For instance, every year my family has a garden that always at least has something growing in it. Or my first job was working on a vegetable farm. For this, I am thankful, as it has given me a very open perspective to the benefits of eating food produced in this manner, and as a kid it gave me the opportunity to enjoy vegetables that many others my age never got the opportunity to experience or learn to enjoy. Another place I ended up being involved with food was my grandfather's old garden. It was a project of his to grow some food for himself, an endeavor which lasted a handful of years. Over time, he began to downsize it as the work began to outweigh the benefits to himself. Year after year, it began to shrink until there was only one bed left that happened to be full of asparagus. For him, the time had come to let this final part of the garden go, and as he requested, I mowed over the area as I had with previous garden beds, leaving his yard gardenless. Or so we thought. The thing some of you might not know about asparagus is that once it is left untouched for its first 2 years, it begins to become self-sufficient, making it become super resilient. This meaning, to this day, year after year, the asparagus pokes its way out of the ground, showing exactly where that bed was, and during the most active time of its most active time of the season, even while mowing over it weekly, there are enough stems to make a dinner side out of every time. The resilience of asparagus is definitely something to admire, and just one of the many examples that if nature is not pushed past its breaking point, it will continue to provide.
Dylan reminded us as we were preparing for this service of the favorite Dr. Seuss quote from the Lorax, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. The path to a better world, Dr. Seuss tells us, is for people to care. Well, and the path to caring is about being connected, about being interconnected and familiar with the world.
I grew up the youngest of 8 children to parents in northwestern Pennsylvania who themselves grew up during the Depression and experienced food rationing in World War II. We had a stove with 8 burners, 2 ovens, a griddle, and a broiler. It's not surprising that having to feed all of us, they were experienced in gardening, foraging, fishing, hunting, beekeeping, and raising chickens and other fowl. And just to show you how my family keeps things, this egg shell is over 44 years old. My mother saved them to do crafting, and crafting with them is on my someday maybe list. I think it might be a duck or maybe even a turkey egg. Some of my favorite memories are walking along the trails in the woods near our home, picking raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries with my dad. Along the way, we'd sometimes find mushrooms to bring home for dinner. He knew which ones were safe and which were not. My mother loved to grow vegetables that seemed unusual to me. I'm still not sure what salsify was, but it sounded exotic. But when she told me the other name for it was vegetable oyster, I wasn't going anywhere near it. She grew Brussels sprouts long before I ever saw one at the grocery store. I wasn't much for weeding, but I loved the harvest and learned to freeze and can produce for the winters. We were always taught not to waste food or waste anything for that matter. We'd hear, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. I remember holidays that were packed with people cooking and baking and sharing stories, and I've tried to pass down the wisdom and love to my own children. They are all excellent cooks, and one is a professional chef. Our holidays continue the loving traditions of our ancestors. Many of you know about John Murray, an early Universalist in this country, who landed in Good Luck, New Jersey, near the home of Thomas Potter. The Murray Grove Retreat and Conference Center is still on this property and is a favorite place for many to use to retreat and relax. One fall, I noticed there were wild Concord grapes growing around the pool, and there was a bumper crop this year. My foraging genes kicked in, and a few grocery bags later, I was on my way home to make jelly. Since John Murray, being a Universalist, believed everyone would get to heaven, it's called No Hell Gel. And I donated most of it back to Murray Grove as a fundraiser. I've been following along with the lives of some youth leaders from my time with the UUA Metro New York District who are now adults. Of course, many of them are in the helping professions, and I'm delighted that more than the average number of them have turned to occupations in sustainable agriculture. Like Katie, who was a farm manager for John Hart Farms, a family-run working farm that offers resources and information to growers at any agricultural scale, from families looking to raise a few chickens to industrial-sized operations. Cassandra in Colorado at Frontline Farming, which is a food and farmers advocacy group focusing on food growing, education, sovereignty, and justice. Tobin in Massachusetts works with Book and Plow Farm, associated with Amherst College. They provide high-quality vegetables and nourishing education that feed the local community in sustainable ways. Watching these youth and my own children grow into caring and nurturing adults really gives me hope for the future.
For my part, I can only witness to the blessing and abundance of the earth. I, unfortunately, am not an attentive gardener. I have many examples I could share of the herbs and the vegetables under my care that did not make it. The farmer's field from my youth, I loved to go down there. It was a fertile land for my imagination, but I never actually paid attention to the food that was growing there as well. As a child, that was a wonderful place to go, but it did not instill in me that particular lesson. I am a child instead of the supermarkets and the restaurants. Kimmerer's question drives right to the heart of my living. Even in a market economy, can we behave as if the world is a gift, she asks, and I wonder if that question is the one that I most need to be asking. Perhaps it is a different question for you. Perhaps you have a story. I am sure that each of you have a story about how you have been nourished by the earth in some manner. How, Kimmerer asks, in our modern world, can we find our way to understand the earth as a gift again, to make our relations with the world sacred again? I know we cannot all become hunter-gatherers. The living world could not bear our weight, she says, but even in a market economy, can we behave as if the living world were a gift? In a world without end, may it be so. We turn our attention now to our joy